You've invented a board game. It was only ever supposed to be a fun little side project, something to fill the time between gaming sessions. But this felt really good. Everyone says you're really onto something. So you start fishing around on the internet. What's the next step? How do you get this game onto store shelves? You discover video channels like mine, full of game design tips. Please like and subscribe. You discover web resources like Cardboard Edison and many Facebook groups focused on board game design. And two little words keep popping out at you: sell sheet. Everyone says you've got to have one. Without a sell sheet, no publisher's ever going to look at your game, they tell you. But what are they on about? What is a sell sheet? How do I make one? And is it really worth the hassle? I'm Adam Porter. I designed the games Pikoko, Doodle Rush, Compromat, Quazzle and several others. And in this video, I'm going to talk through my own experiences with sell sheets and give you some tips about how and when to make your own. A sell sheet is a single page advertisement for your product. That's it. No big mystery. They're used in every industry, promoting products and services. And in the board game world, sell sheets have a variety of different functions. They might be used by a publisher to attract a distributor for their games. They might be used by a distributor to attract a retailer, or they might be used by a retailer to advertise their products to shoppers. But in this video, we're going to focus on sell sheets created by inventors to promote their prototype game to a publisher. Reading internet forums, you could easily get the impression that sell sheets are essential, required, mandatory, and that the absence of a sell sheet is the mark of a rank amateur. No publisher will give you the time of day if you don't send them that A4 advertisement. But the real picture is a bit more patchy than that. The truth is, many publishers do request sell sheets, and many don't. And some will outright tell you not to use them. It was several years into my game design journey that I started dabbling with sell sheets. From day one, I always sent Sizzle reels for my board game prototypes, along with a short introductory paragraph about the game and a single image by email. I've made a separate video about how to create your own promotional video or Sizzle reel for your game. See the link above. In the hundreds of pitch meetings with publishers that I attended at Essen Spiel, no one ever asked me for a sell sheet. But after a few years, I did start to experiment with them. By 2016, I was attending trade fairs and conventions regularly, and I generally had a suitcase full of different prototypes, sometimes up to 6 or 7 different games. Publishers would often meet with me just to check out what I was currently working on, rather than to look at a specific game. This is where building relationships is so important. If you go back and watch my video about pitching, you'll see that I prioritize pitching myself as a potential collaborator over pitching a specific game. In these meetings, it was incredibly useful to have 1 or 2 sheets of paper with 3 or 4 brief game summaries on each. I would show these little brochures to the publisher at the start of a meeting and let them glance over them. They would point to the games that caught their interest, and that's what I would pitch. That's how a sell sheet should function. At a glance, you have mere seconds to catch a publisher's attention, so these documents should be brief and striking. A sell sheet is not about detail, it's all about the hook. In subsequent years, I allowed myself a single sheet per game, which is the industry norm. I figure if you're worrying about carrying around a stack of sell sheets and feeling the need to condense them, then you're probably trying to pack too much into your pitch. Focus on the games which most closely fit the publisher's needs. You can always pitch the others at a later date. I frequently found myself using these sell sheets when approaching publishers at conventions without a pre-arranged meeting. For many publishers, that's impossible, so don't rely on this approach. But I would often find myself with a few minutes to spare at Essen Spiel or UK Games Expo. I'd strike up a conversation with one of the smaller publishers at a quieter stand, and if I thought they might be a good fit, I'd ask them if they might be interested in looking at a prototype game, and maybe make an appointment. It was so much quicker, easier and less awkward to pull out a sell sheet in that initial conversation than it was to set up a prototype game or to describe it without any visual aids at all, especially if there was a language barrier to overcome. My sell sheets always have small images of my earlier published games at the base, and I would point to these games to demonstrate that I was somebody worth talking to. Sometimes the publisher might recognise one of my games, but sometimes they wouldn't. Now, I'm not an expert in marketing, and I'm not sure that I have any true expertise in creating sell sheets, but I do know that the central image does a lot of the work. If you have seconds to catch somebody's attention, a picture speaks 1,000 words. All at once, the picture identifies the theme or setting of the game, the broad genre, card game, dice game, party game, etc., an approximation of cost, this game seems to have rather a lot of components, and the game's potential table presence. In most instances, the publisher has made up their mind right there, that's all it takes. We're just not in the market for a dice game right now. We don't make games with miniatures. Over recent years, I've been a little bit more consistent with producing sell sheets. In fact, these days I produce a sell sheet for every new prototype which I intend to pursue to publication, and their function has changed for me. While I do still use the strategies I described, I now send a sell sheet with my initial pitch email, unless the publisher has specifically asked me not to. More and more publishers these days are using online forms for game submissions, and frequently these have no facility for uploading a sell sheet. The reason I send sell sheets in that initial pitch email is that these documents pretty much contain the same information that I was sending anyway, a short passage of text, a single image, and some contact details. But in a sell sheet, I have the opportunity to present this information in a more visually appealing way. Now, I'm no graphic designer, but the sell sheets I create using a bog standard word processor on my Mac far surpasses what I could create in Hotmail. So my standard initial approach in 2022 is an email with a brief hello, followed by a link to a Sizzle reel and an attached sell sheet. I'll also have a rules PDF on standby in case the publisher requests it. These days, it's not a bad idea to have a tabletop simulator or Tabletopia mod available too, in case the publisher wants to try out your prototype virtually. I don't always do this though, because I find it incredibly tedious. But if they asked for it, in most instances I'd probably be able to knock something together pretty quickly. So what should your sell sheet contain? Well, anything you think might persuade the publisher to look closer. Really, it's literally a blank slate. You could include whatever you want. But there are some standard tips which get bandied about a lot, and I would recommend following them in most instances. The game's title is important. Make this prominent, but it doesn't need to take up half the page. I generally stick the title at the top of the page, but you could experiment with your layout. The basic information for the game, duration, age range, and player count. I have a standard 3-box format which I just modify for each new sell sheet. A very brief statement describing the hook of the game. You can find out more about hooks by watching my video on the topic. This statement should not simply describe the mechanisms of gameplay, it should be a blended statement describing the narrative or theme of the game, something about the gameplay, and ideally how the players are going to feel playing your game. A sell sheet is an exercise in telling a story with the smallest possible word count. If you're struggling with this concept, spend some time on TikTok or Instagram Reels and you'll get the idea. This sort of short-form storytelling is a real skill, and many content creators in these spaces are masters at it. Avoid all the obvious cliches. Don't describe your game or even the mechanisms within the game as unique. It probably isn't. Don't oversell the game. This is the greatest game since Monopoly. This game will sell millions. It almost certainly won't. I put my central image, or maybe a couple of images, up front and center. Images of gameplay are more engaging than images of a pile of components. And really try to capture an attractive image. Think about lighting, lay out your components in an attractive fashion, tidy up your tabletop and background. I might put other visual elements from the game around the borders to fill white space and reinforce the theme of the game. Usually, I'll try to describe a turn of play, ideally capturing the most exciting decisions and moments in the game. I write this in second person, by which I mean I speak directly to the reader. Reveal a card, take an action, draw a new card, rather than the player reveals a card, they then take an action, the player draws a new card. The first version feels more dynamic and involving. It's the same approach I take when I'm writing rules. I keep this very brief and I leave out all the detail. This is not the place to teach your game. Finally, I list the components, again briefly with no detail, just to give an indication of cost of production. And then I put my visual CV at the base of the sheet, my published games and awards, to make it clear that I'm someone worth meeting. But don't worry if this is your first game, that's fine. Just put your contact details down there. As I said before, the central image is going to do 90% of the work on this sheet, and almost all publishers are willing to work with first-timers if they have a good concept and an agreeable personality. People share their sell sheets frequently on designer forums, looking for feedback. And the most common mistakes I see are too much text, Large blocks of text do nothing for you. Nobody is going to read it. We need bare bones. There is no obvious hook. The designer describes the mechanisms and the theme, and it all sounds fine, but there's nothing that stands out from the thousands of other games on the market. The layout, the font and background colours make the sheet unappealing, or in some cases unreadable. Keep it simple. Plain is better than messy. One final reason that I use sell sheets is that they help me distill a game concept to its very core, in my head. If I'm struggling to create a one-page summary, well, perhaps I can't identify the hook, or I can't describe a turn of play within a few sentences, then that suggests the game has bloated or lacks relevance. It doesn't bode well for the game's chances in the marketplace. After all, your potential customers are going to make their purchasing decision based on a glance and a snap judgment, just like the publisher did. So good luck with your sell sheets and the inevitable pitch meetings which will follow. If you have any questions about sell sheets or you have any other tips for designers, let me know in the comments. And as always, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. All the best.